My name is Aaron Reimel. I'm a product manager in observability and management, and we're here for monitoring Oracle applications and their stack on Oracle Cloud infrastructure. So, what's really going to be fun about this session? This is a new format that we tried at Oracle Cloud World, and what's I think fun about this one is that there aren't a lot of slides. We're almost all the way through them. So with that, we're going to do a quick introduction of Oracle's observability and management platform. We're going to do a quick overview of Stack Monitoring itself, and then we're going to spend the majority, almost the entire rest of the session, just going through different troubleshooting scenarios and workflows, and then how we got there. So it's all going to be about being in the product instead of you guys looking at me knock through some slides. So with that said, let's move on forward. All right. So to start off, Oracle's observability and management services, they're an advanced set of services that they can run, we don't really care where. Oracle Cloud, if your stuff's running on premise, it could be AWS, Azure. Honestly, we don't really care. Of course, we we prefer OCI, but we can work anywhere you are. On top of all that, you've got your melts, your metrics, events, logs, traces, and SQL, and then you have these advanced set of services. And that's application performance monitoring, stack monitoring, logging analytics, database and OS management, as well as operational insight. So today, the majority of this presentation is going to be about how to monitor those your applications running in OCI, leveraging stack monitoring. So what is this? Stack monitoring, it lets you proactively monitor an application and its underlying application stack. With its one-click discovery, will automatically build homepages, start collecting metrics, and construct the topology. We'll see how all of that plays out and how that helps you troubleshoot an application. So, like I said, everything starts collecting immediately once you discover it. We'll go get all those, its availability and performance metrics and health and all those wonderful things that you would expect when trying to monitor your application. And of course, we're going to give you kind of that bird's eye view with the enterprise summary and other dashboards. So, with that, let's get out of PowerPoint and one more. Sorry, I lied. All right. So what we're going to cover. Now, this is kind of a loose interpretation of what we're going to cover. Generally, we go through, enterprise summary and resource homepages and discovery and process set monitoring and metric extent, a bunch of different things. But what I'm going to do instead is kind of go through a troubleshooting workflow. We'll go through that whole thing and we'll start off with the enterprise summary, drive down into resource homepages, and then ultimately talk about how we got there and some other fun features that help make it easier to monitor your applications. So with that said, let's get out of here and go here. All right. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with, say, Enterprise Manager, but a lot of Enterprise Manager features are very similar to what we offer in Stack Monitoring, except that it's a cloud-based service. And to start off with that, we think of with the enterprise summary. Enterprise Manager kind of has the same thing, and it gives you that 10,000 foot view of all of your resources and helps you quickly identify what resources are down or what resources are not reporting. And to do so, just simply click down and you can get that list of resources that are in a down state. Now, it's great that, I mean, we've got application servers, database servers, hosts, whatever it is. Um, the status by resource type helps put those into logical groupings to make that easier for you, right? So we come off and we've got your hosts, your databases. You can see that you've got 4 app servers that are in a down state, for instance. You can also just simply click the down button. And you see those same 4 app servers as well as one other. So what's an other? Well, for this one, it's a custom application of Nginx. Now, where this gets a little bit different is like with this, with EBS 04A. This is 3 components of a single EBS application are in a down state. So if we come here and we look over to the right side, this has gone from showing you the overall number. There's 10 application servers, right? And there was 4 that were in a down state and 1 not reporting. This is of an entire EBS application, there are three components of that are down, where all of my PeopleSoft are up. And then these are Oracle database systems, meaning the database system comprises of the listeners, the cluster, ASM, CDB, PDBs, etc. And we'll show you that entire construct of a database system all in one view. And clicking any of these will take you directly to that resources homepage where you can start triaging and diagnosing why those elements are down, those resources are down. So then we come to alarms. And one of my favorite things about having a cloud-based application is you don't have to sit there and test things. Like when you have a new code release, you've got to go in, you've got to test it, and make sure there's no problems and everything works just right. With cloud, you just show up one day and all of a sudden new features are there. And so one of those that came out, this has been a little bit now, but it's still fantastic to have, is our summary of alarms. So we'll naturally give you the severity, the trigger time, the resource name, metric name, the dimension of the metric that's firing. But what's really fun, I'm going to use that a lot, and I apologize, is current value. And current value helps because those DevOps engineers, just because you have a critical alarm on a file system, how do you know how to prioritize this, right? I can come down here and see that my JD Edwards is 97% utilized in its root file system. I'm probably going to prioritize that over 81% utilized of this file system, right? So all of a sudden, I'm just using the data that's on the screen to be able to help, prioritize all of my open alarms. Now, I also want to make note while we're here, this is another thing that just came out here recently is maintenance windows. So we have also identified these open alarms that are in a firing state, but telling you someone has realized they're either working on it or they're suppressing those those alarm notifications because they've realized that now they're kind of triaging the problem and they want the notifications to stop. But this also helps your DevOps engineers to come in here and see, oh, all right, well, these two are, open alarms and not being suppressed. I should probably start with those because someone is clearly working on these. And we'll talk a little bit more about maintenance windows in a little bit. So once you get past that overall availability and alarm section, then the enterprise summary drops everything down into different tiers. And something else, I don't know if you've ever looked at enterprise summary before, but we've added line charts in here. And so any of these charts, every tier can be renamed. If you don't have an EBS and you're just a DBA, I don't mean just a DBA. I was one a long, long time ago. Um, but if you're a DBA, you can completely customize this entire page to meet your exact needs and then save that guy as your default down here. And then every time you come here, you'll always see that exact same view. Because, I mean, maybe your organization doesn't have a PeopleSoft, or maybe it doesn't have an EBS. Whatever it is, this is completely customizable from the name to every chart that's in it. So we break these down into tiers, and we start off with the application layer, like EBS or PeopleSoft, and then we move further down, like the application servers, right? Whether it's WebLogic or Tomcat, and then finally database and hosts. And so it's kind of like the same way that I visualize, at least myself, in the construct of how an application's built with the layers and moving all the way down to the base layer being the host or storage. So the line charts help if you've got just a few different resources and you just want to see a few lines. But the scatter plots help provide kind of a heat map to be able to understand um, how things are. Number one, compare any two metrics, like Oracle database time versus its wait time. And with those dots in the top right being the busiest, and the ones at the bottom left being most idle. And so from that point, you can easily understand where resources are running hot or where ones that aren't doing anything, and maybe Mike forgot to start Tomcat or something again. So scrolling down, another benefit is in that heat map, right? And allowing you to monitor by exception. Now, I didn't think of it as monitoring by exception when I managed production systems, but ultimately that's what I did, right? I would get a call in the middle of the night, Aaron, identity's down. And you're like, if identity's really down, the entire world would be on fire. Now, then I couldn't get off the call until I realized what was wrong. So then I would go through everybody else's dashboards and their logs and everything else trying to figure out where the problem was. And I did that by monitoring by exception. Monitoring by exception is just one of these things is not like the other, right? And in typical, you can see, the majority of the time things kind of run together. Now, why all these guys all of a sudden are using 100% swap, I'm not real sure, but I need to look at that. But the other thing too is, I've got a grouping of hosts, but then I've got one little guy that's over here that's, using quite a bit more CPU than others. Is that expected? And hosts or scatter plots give you that, allow you to compare those two metrics. They allow you to monitor by exception, but they don't give you that historical context. Is this just the value that's happened to be there while I've when I loaded the page, or has this been occurring for some time? So if I click the link, I find that's where I get this information. I get a slide out, and this gives me that information about its historical context. And I can come back and say, last 24 hours. And you're like, oh, okay. I can, you know, just about anybody, if I, gave this to, a small child, they would figure out, hey, when did things change? And I think that they could pretty much come to the conclusion that this is when things went different, right? And so from this point, maybe we need to go in and take a closer look. So we've definitely identified when the CPU utilization and load switched. And then we used the breadcrumb to take us to that instance. So we found one host whose CPU was much higher than all the others. Click the link. We found that that changed within the last 24 hours, and that's taken us to our host homepage. Now, from our host homepage, we can identify that this is a E4 Flex. It's running Oracle Linux. It's an OCI compute. We can see that there are 4 open alarms for this. And clicking that, we can see there looks to be all file system alarms. So nothing else there. And then scrolling down, oh, before I go too far, we've also recently implemented these key metrics. And the point here is that when you navigate to this page, you want to be able to just get a quick identification of some of the top, key metrics per se of how this host is performing. And so from here, without ever scrolling down and looking deeper at charts, we can get an understanding of its CPU, its memory, its swap utilization, and network activity. Now, scrolling down, we can see that historically, the availability has been up. And I guess let's see. I guess I didn't mention that I appreciate this little feature here, how long it's been up for. So this thing's been up since September 18th. Um, but it gives you that historical context of how long it's been up. We can choose to go back 24 hours again if we want to see that change in CPU utilization. During that time, there was no additional memory changes. File system utilization and usage all appear to be pretty similar. There's a little spike in disk and paging activity, but overall, everything so far seems, pretty consistent other than, the CPU utilization. So here we can see that anomaly detection has just gone wild to show that, hey, uh, we want to help try and level up that this hasn't been consistent performance. And so here, Stack Monitoring's gone out and it's identified this current performance as being anomalous and has highlighted that information here. So here we can see that it's anomalous. The baseline was, typically closer to 4, just depending on the time. We'll show you kind of and there's 2 different things there, but it'll tell you, what the baseline was expected. So here we've definitely identified that the current CPU utilization is anomalous. Now, we can maybe we need to reboot this host to go clean it up, or maybe we need to just simply change the shape and add CPU. This is one of my favorite features is up at the top, we provide you this link. And this link punches out to the OCI Compute homepage. Now, why I love this, among a number of other reasons, right? It's fantastic in that from here, I can stop it, reboot it, change the shape. I can actually make the necessary changes. And why this is so important to me, because I remember being an engineer and having a need for CPU or memory or something, and having to send a guy out to the data center, trying to find the right rack, and inevitably once a year someone, reboots the wrong host or shuts down the wrong server rather. So then VMs came along and those were supposed to save our lives, right? It made it so much simpler. All you had to do was navigate to another web page, go find your host, and then add CPU to it. And, inevitably, once again, there wasn't enough compute in that cluster and you'd have to migrate it to another cluster. So it was better, but it wasn't fantastic. Now we've gotten to this cloud computing world like OCI where you can just simply say, I want to change the shape. I want more memory. And as long as the policies are there, you just keep expanding, right? Um, but having your monitoring integrated with your infrastructure, this is where that really keys in, is that breadcrumb that helps you move seamlessly from monitoring to infrastructure without ever searching. I didn't have to go up to my menu to go figure out, all right, let me go find where this host is, search it by name. And in hindsight, I wish I wouldn't have named it EBS because we know probably what it's associated with. But if your compute is just simply cattle, you aren't going to know what this is. So here I've decided that I could come in and reboot it or add memory. But before I do that, I need to understand what's running on this host. So I go back to my other tab and I use the topology. Now, this topology is telling me that on this host is, a WebLogic domain admin server, an OAFM cluster server, current processing, form server, OA core server, C4WS server, and CP node apps. We've got a PDB that's running on here. So there's a bunch of it's basically an entire EBS application is running on this single node. Now, historically, if you've got to go make changes to a host, you've got to go understand all the different resources that are running on it. And the topology helps you understand quickly exactly which portions of that EBS are running on it. And so we've been able to go from identifying one host where its CPU is a little higher, dove in, we looked, and we found that the performance overall hadn't changed, but the CPU had gone up. We navigated to the infrastructure's homepage, again, just following the troubleshooting workflow, the links, and had the ability to go reboot, change the shape, add memory, etc. But before we did so, we leveraged the out-of-the-box topology to help inform us of exactly what's running on that host. So now I know all the things that are running on it, but I also know that typically I'm not going to take something down in the middle of the day. My users are going to be really upset. So now I need to know, does this current CPU impact the application itself? And that's where I can again use this topology to so not only identify what's running on the host, but then to navigate to the overall application like EBS. And this is where I can go inspect to understand whether or not the CPU is having a negative impact on that host. So the EBS homepage, much like a host homepage, right, all has kind of the same look and feel, except we've added a couple little things. So we've got the related resources, which again show us how many resources of this construct are down, this application. Another great feature, I think, is a summary of open alarms. So before we looked at an overall of all your entire enterprise, or we looked at alarms just for that host. But with this, we've gone in and been able to summarize all the open alarms related to this one. Now, being able to see this keeps me from having to go to excuse me, the host homepage, the concurrent manager, the WebLogic servers, the Oracle databases. I don't have to go to every single page to go figure out what are my open alarms. I can see all of that from right here. So it ultimately it saves you a bunch of time from clicking all over the country to just simply landing in one spot. Additionally, we talked about the key metrics, and here's another example where we've informed you that these active requests by application has a current count of 28, and it's now that has an alarm against it and is in a warning state. So if this was critical or warning, you would see these little icons here. And again, that keeps you from having to scroll through everything. It's just giving you a quick insight into the performance and health of this EBS. So EBS itself has a few metrics, right? Executed programs by runtime, completed concurrent requests. But where things really get fun is with the stack view. And this is where we can get that view of the overall performance of an entire application. So instead of just looking at going to each page individually, going to WebLogic, going to Oracle database, going to the host, etc., trying to find and identify what that performance is like, I can come to one place and I can see, once again, here's those top programs by average runtime. It's got the little plus to tell us it's baseline enabled. We can come down, we can see performance of the concurrent manager. Further down, we've got WebLogic OA core. And if you're not familiar with what EBS, OA core is kind of the heart of EBS. If it's down or having problems, basically the entire application is down. And from there, we can see, heap utilization, whether or not we have any hogging or idle threads. Further down, we can see our transactions, we can see our wait times for the Oracle database, and finally, we can see that CPU utilization that we saw earlier that was high, and as well as that high, we see some high memory utilization. So from here, maybe it makes sense then from this understanding, right, of reviewing the overall performance of the stack view, I feel like in general that EBS is running along pretty well. The CPU doesn't seem to be impacting it. I don't have to take a downtime exactly now. I can do that at another time. So with that said, maybe I want to keep track of that CPU utilization a little bit more. And so I can come down here, go to the enterprise summary. And like we said, we can come in, click edit, update the card, and we can make it a line chart. We can do a table. Let's make it a line chart for now. We can say high to low. I don't know. What do we want to do? The top 10? Sure. And we can see, oh, sorry, clicked the wrong thing. CPU utilization, that helps. All right. And then from the CPU utilization, then we can come in and we can keep, an eye on CPU utilization from that stance. Or, if a table view is more what you're looking for, to be able to see those numbers here, then it works out pretty well. So we go from there. How did we get here? So we've gone over how you can find how you can identify and monitor by exception, how you can see the overview of all of the health and performance of your entire infrastructure. But how did we get to that spot? Well, to do that, we did a couple different things. Number one, we start off with promote to full monitoring. Now, what this does is this allows you to promote your host to full monitoring, where you get more fine-grained metric collection of your hosts. You get file system utilization, all those things that are completely necessary when monitoring a host. And recently we've made this easier for you. So instead of going in and manually monitoring every single host, you can simply just enable this by compartment to where you'll automatically monitor every host in your compartment. Now, currently, when you go to monitor that, when you do this, and again, it doesn't matter where you're running. It could be on-prem, it could be in OCI, wherever. Anytime you install a management agent and enable this feature, Stack Monitoring will automatically start monitoring that host for you. So the good part about this being per compartment is that if you have a test domain, you don't, or a test compartment, and you don't really want to enable automatic monitoring for every one of your test hosts, then you don't have to do that, and you can manually promote each one of those. However, in production, you want to monitor those things, and you can enable automatic host promotion. Now, coming up, we have yet another improvement on this is the ability to listen to OCI events. And as a compute is provisioned, we'll automatically start monitoring it. Once you destroy it, then we'll delete it. So it's going to be a lot smoother workflow as far as less, you don't have to worry about going in and clicking the button to enable the management agent. It just saves you time. So once all of your hosts are monitored, then you come in and you do discover resources. So this is a lot like Enterprise Manager. We talked about that in the beginning about how the Enterprise Summary is very similar to um, how the Enterprise Summary is very similar to Enterprise Manager's Enterprise Summary. The discovery in many ways is kind of the same flow, right? So then after you discover a host, the next thing you should do is discover your Oracle database. But due to time constraints, let's just jump right over to an application. So we're going to pretend we've already done the host, we've already done the database. Now we're moving to, discovering EBS. And here we can just say, like my prod EBS. We can say, yeah, it's running 12.2 version, apps.example.com. This is the database. So we're running in 1521. This is EBSDB, and it's running a TCP protocol. After that, you simply give it its credentials, something like DBS and MP, your password, and now we go to the WebLogic server. So again, that one was running on apps.example.com. This is 7001, and it's not running HTTPS, it's just HTTP, so we'll leave it T3 and WLS admin and choose the management agent that's monitoring it, right? That's it. That's really all there is to the process of discovering an EBS, where it'll go find the entire EBS application, like Concurrent Manager. And this works for PeopleSoft, et cetera. But also WebLogic, the WebLogic domain, the WebLogic cluster, WebLogic servers. Um, it's going to create all the relationships with the Oracle database, the PDB. And I guess I should mention that when you discover an Oracle database like the CDB, it will also discover ASM, the listeners, the cluster, etc. So I did skip over that. Now, the next thing to talk about is where to discover this in. And by default, we say stack monitoring and logging analytics. So even if you're not a logging analytics customer, it will still ship that data over. That way, if you do decide to become a logging analytics customer, or you are a logging analytics customer, it will save you an entire step of having to just discover something, but just discover it once. So by default, we go there. Another another thing I'm not sure too many folks realize is long running concurrent request threshold. This is just, advanced features that maybe your long running requests are actually 15 minutes, but you can go and configure that. Another thing that I recommend you do is come into like Oracle Standard and add some tags. And what this will do, if this is our production application, it's going to apply this tag to all of the resources that it discovers, including the Oracle database, right? So everything in that topology, it's going to take this tag and go apply it throughout that entire tree. You don't have to go manually add these every single time. And even if you're on a resource homepage, it's going to take care of that for you as well. So once you finish a discovery, Stack monitoring will automatically then start populating that enterprise summary. It will create those home pages. It will create um, it'll start collecting all of those metrics. So then what's the best next step, right? If you've already got the resource discovered and you're already collecting metrics, the next step is to go define alarms. Now, sadly, I don't have it ready for you here today, but it is coming soon. We've got monitoring templates coming out soon. So every one of the resource types that we provide you out of the box, whether it's WebLogic, Tomcat, uh, PeopleSoft, whatever it is, Oracle database system, we'll have an out-of-the-box monitoring template. It's like an EM. It's a Oracle certified template where every one of the uh, the metrics and their values is predefined for you. So say CPU utilization has a warning for 70% and a critical for 90. Or, in WebLogic, maybe a heap utilization alarm, etc. I wish I had more of that to show you here today, but um, it's going to allow you to, once you have something discovered, to simply to standardize and simplify the monitoring process throughout your uh, you know, entire set of monitored resources. So if I go out and I now have alarms defined on, you know, all these different resources, what happened? How do I and okay, so let's take a step back. So we've realized that we want to add CPU to that host that we looked at earlier, right? And we want to add additional, we want to change the shape, increase the size of CPU. So in order to take that host down, we've got to go figure out every resource that's running on that host. We've got to figure, we looked at that topology and there was that long laundry list. So I've got to go and I've got to figure out everything that's running on that host. And then every alarm associated with every one of those resources that are running on that host. So let's say you've got 10 alarms, just to make it easy, on every resource, and you've got 10 resources that are running on that host. You've got 100 different alarms that you've got to go try and figure out, where, let's see. So if you come over here to monitoring, alarm definitions, you would come here and you would have to figure out those 100 alarms. That's a daunting task and without question error prone. So in a recent release, what we've done is really simplified that process. We say add CPU to EBS host, add our resource. We're going to come down here and go host. Here's our host that we were looking at, add selected resource. And Stack Monitoring has come out and figured out using the topology, these are my 9 resources that are running on that host. Now, what this will do, we can then, okay, so let's continue. This isn't repeating. This is a one-time activity, right? But we know we want to start it. I don't know where everybody is. We'll leave it at UTC. But let's say that we just want to start it at 10 p.m., right? And we want it to go for, it'll probably take us, 10 minutes, but we'll say 1 hour and then we can end it early. And from that point, then we just simply click create. And what this is going to go do is it's going to go out and create a maintenance window, which will suppress all those alarm notifications, like we saw in the alarm summary, right? It's going to go suppress all of those open alarms to where you're not getting hammered as soon as you take down that host and you're starting to get availability alarms on the PDB, the host, the concurrent manager, the all those different WebLogic servers we saw, all of that stuff. You're not going to get all those hundreds of alarms that are going off over and over and over again. We're still going to tell you that it's in a firing state, but we're going to tell you, we're going to give you that little wrench and inform you that those resources are now in a maintenance window. And so you won't get all those open alarms. You're going to see just what we saw at the enterprise summary, where, knowing that we're it's not actively in a maintenance window now, but you're going to go in, you're going to see those resources that are in a maintenance window. And again, all you had to do was define the resource you were doing work on. We were doing work on EBS, but it has consequences. And the topology helped solve all of that, all of those, additional resources related to that. So super helpful. It will prevent a whole bunch of alarm noise and frustration for you. So that's going to complement monitoring templates quite well. So another thing that we've got out here, we've talked about how to discover a resource, right? The traditional out of the box EBS, Oracle database system, Tomcat, WebLogic server, whatever it is. But what if you have a custom resource, a resource that stack monitoring either A doesn't have, or you have something so custom like a Java process running that we'll never figure out, right? We would never create support for. So we have solutions for that. Number one, with stack monitoring, you can take, okay, any Prometheus-based resource, and instead of pointing that at your repository, point it back at stack monitoring, and we'll go create a resource out of that. So anything that Prometheus can monitor, you can ship that to Stack Monitoring, and we'll go create all the home pages. Then you can complete the topology about resources that are there out of the box and all that different stuff, right? And the hosts that they're running on inside of OCI. Now, soon we'll also be adding Telegraph and collectd support to help complement Prometheus. So almost no matter what kind of format you've got it in, we can help you with that. Now, another uh, resource to import is load balancer. Let's see. So with the load balancer, let me show you this because I think this is super helpful. I talked about how much I loved having that breadcrumb back to the OCI compute instance. Well, if you come down here to the WebLogic domain, I've done this, OAFM cluster. And these little breadcrumbs are everywhere where it gives you a link to open in a new tab so you don't lose your history or lose your current place. It's super helpful. Anyhow, um, what we've done here is we've imported an OCI service. So I've imported an OCI load balancer. Now, what that does is instead of me trying to figure out what the performance is for my load balancer and going up here and going into networking, and once again, just like compute, instead of trying to search and find the load balancer, I've identified that this load balancer supports this OAFM cluster. Now, I had to import this load balancer and then manually create the link, but it's simply a couple clicks, right? But once you have that, now whenever you're in an incident, you're no longer trying to remember what that load balancer is called that's servicing that WebLogic cluster. It's right here. And we've come in and we've given you the same performance metrics that you would get. We've added the topology. And just like I've said before, that, okay, so there's zero connections. So was someone performing maintenance on this WebLogic cluster and forgot to put, the server back in load? Let's go find out. And now we've given you once again that breadcrumb that takes you into OCI infrastructure. We've gone from monitoring to infrastructure for the second time, and we can come in and then make all the changes that we need to this load balancer to put something back in load or whatever it is, whatever work that we need to perform. But the key here is never searching for a resource, never navigating through the menu items to go find what you need because, time is money and SLAs are expensive. So if you can follow just a couple of clicks, it's going to save you a lot. So you can you can use, goodness gracious, you can, we have out of the box, you can use Prometheus and soon Telegraph and collectd. You can import other services like OCI load balancers and storage, etc. But if you have your own custom application, then you can come in and use our monitor processes. And what this does is you define the process signature of exactly what it is that's running on your host. And we'll create a resource out of it. So to save a little time, I'll just pull up an Nginx one that I've already created. And here we can see that we've given it the name Nginx Production App, which I somewhat regret. Um, and and then the process set definition. So this is what we're going to go grep for on the host itself to go identify that resource that's running, right? So the process command, Nginx itself. Well, Nginx has two very different uh, types of processes that are running, right? The master and the worker. And so for that reason, we've come in and we've created the label of Nginx main process. This is what we're going to see on every one of the charts. So when you go in and you look at Nginx as its own homepage and resource, you're going to see performance charts for like CPU utilization, but you will be able to differentiate how much the main process is using versus the work process is using. So to do so, we've given it the label of main, the process command of Nginx. and then the regular expression of Nginx master. So anything with that after, it's going to be lumped into this filter. Now, if we only want to look for if it's running as OPC or root or whatever, we can add that user here. And the same we did down here with Nginx work processes, Nginx, and then we did Nginx worker. So here where we can define what hosts that Nginx is running on, and then here we've seen one that we've deployed. So going to this, we can see its homepage. We've got a couple key metrics here. We can see that its availability has been down for quite some time, but really this is just meant to show you CPU utilization with baselines enabled and memory utilization and process details. So these are the kind of metrics and then that we'll collect, and then you can create alarms against any of these metrics here. So you can create the availability alarm when Nginx goes down or if CPU is above a certain level. So another thing that you can do, all right, so now we've talked about custom applications, resource types that you might have. But what if we don't collect metrics that you're expecting or that you need, right? One example I used when I was a DBA, I had a set of DBMS jobs. Those DBMS jobs were supposed to run on a specific cadence, and um, once a day or once a week rather, I had to go out and figure out, are those DBMS jobs there? Are they scheduled for the right times? And are they running, right? Because they were very critical. And I had all of these, this was outlined for me to do as a DBA when I joined. Here's the stuff that we've got to make sure happens all the time. So what I did is I went in and I created a metric extension. And the metric extension went out and it checked whether or not my DBMS jobs were there, whether they were scheduled right, running on the right cadence, and whether or not they were running. And suddenly, instead of spending, this was just one of the tasks that I used metric extensions for, instead of spending an entire day looking at my database trying to figure out whether or not things were running right, I was also using it as almost like a configuration check. It was kind of cool. So metric extensions can be flexed to do a number of different things that are very unique to your environment that will help you out. So, like an example, I've created an example metric extension for user memory usage. And what this has done is it goes out and it executes this script, user mem usage, and it it returns two different columns, the user that's using it and the amount of memory they're using. And all this does is simply say Oracle is using 40% of the memory, or it's like 40 megs of memory or something, and OPC is using 10 megs of memory. And then you can set alarms against those. Has Oracle's memory run off the charts, right? Does it have some sort of memory leak that he's going crazy? Um, so metric extensions can just be used for a number of different ways to help you. Now, one last thing that I wanted to talk about before I let you go is with baselines. So we talked about baselines today, and by by default, out of the box, we'll give you a number of metrics that have baselines enabled. But what if those aren't the ones that you're interested in? What if there's other ones out there that you're looking for? And with that, you can come in and say, all right, for my hosts, so I currently have these defined by Oracle, but maybe I want file system utilization and swap utilization. I can add those two additional metrics. And from there, every host page that I navigate to will now have baselines enabled for file system utilization and swap utilization. So it's just another way that if we haven't provided you exactly what you're looking for out of the box, there's a number of ways in here to be able to help, um, customize your monitoring to be able to help meet your unique needs. So to recap, um, number one, whenever you're monitoring your entire infrastructure, right, this it helps to be able to quickly identify the resources that are down or not reporting. To be able to come here and identify all of your open alarms and prioritize those open alarms based on their current value and dimension but also which ones are in maintenance or not. If you know they're in maintenance, then someone else is working on that and you don't have to pay attention to it, or at least you know who to blame. The other option too is to monitor by exception. Go find those outliers and identify those and use the troubleshooting workflow to be able to navigate up and down that application stack and always use those breadcrumbs to help take you to the OCI infrastructure to help make those changes and fix the problem, reboot the server, whatever it is, quickly without having to use that whole navigation tree. Don't forget about the stack view to look over the entire application and to get that kind of quick view of the overall health and performance of an application. And if it's not there out of the box, there's a number of ways to customize and flex the monitoring to help meet your unique business needs, either through Prometheus or metric extensions or you name it, right? Um, and then simplify your monitoring with those maintenance windows where it's that topology aware. Don't go try and figure out the 100 alarms related to that one resource. Just put the host in maintenance and let Stack Monitoring's topology figure all of that out for you. And soon be on the watch. We're gonna put up a thing here in just a minute, but don't forget to watch for new features and functions coming out, especially monitoring templates, because I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Did you want to speak to this slide?
Yeah, this is just a list of relevant resources. I've put several in the chat. All of these links will be listed in the replay. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Well, and as you said, there's the link up here for observability and management to email us. So if you think of something after everything's over,
Cost licensing requirement.
sure. Yep. So in this link here, the docs.oracle.com, we have a link there that takes you to cost. There's a couple different editions, standard and enterprise edition. And the standard edition certainly is not meant to have any barrier towards adoption. So, take a look at it. I like to think that, especially standard edition is really affordable. So,
And we have a few minutes left. I'm going to give that time back to you. Aaron, thank you for this great session. That concludes our call for today.